Greetings, dear adventurers! As promised, this will be our final episode of Dark Dice Shores of the Silver Thrum in 2024. After this episode, we'll be returning to Season 2 of Dark Dice with the intent of resolving as much of the Westpike Arkwright story as is humanly possible between now and October. My goal is to actually resolve the entire season if that is possible, and that's a lot of content, years in the making, and half a decade of recording. Just a reminder, we'll be live streaming our soundtrack recording on social media on June 6th, June 10th, and July 1st. I'm told we'll be joined by none other than the composers Austin Wintry and Yuzo Koshiro for some of the sessions. And during the choir recording on June 10th, I will physically be present in Budapest, live streaming my enthusiasm and panic on Instagram with my phone. We hope to see you there. But before we begin, this week I wanted to give a special shout out to Nomono. That's no mono, like no mono, the sound term that's the opposite of stereo, mono. Nomono is a sound technology company based out of Norway that has invented and perfected one of the coolest recording devices ever made, the Nomono Sound Capsule. It's a portable recording pod, see what I did there, that houses 4 lapel microphones and a special room microphone that either allows you to showcase or else remove the ambient noise from your recordings. These are not sold at a low-end price point because they are some of the best pieces of equipment you can purchase in the world, and it's about the same cost as purchasing 4 quality microphones. Last summer, we had the unique privilege of recording interviews with their prototype sound capsule, traveling to Svalbard, Norway, literally recording discussions while traveling at 20 kilometers an hour on a Zodiac boat in 40 kilometer per hour winds in the Arctic for our Svalbardia series, and the audio sounds amazing. You can hear it on the White Vault podcast. We also used Nomono Sound Capsules to record our interview with Yoshitaka Amano and performed a number of stress tests with 2 Nomono Sound Capsules working simultaneously at D&D in a castle, recording all 28 hours of audio for 8 players, recording in a literal stone dungeon that sounded as good as if we were in a recording studio. All this to say, we greatly appreciate Nomono for sponsoring Fool and Scholar Productions. If we, say, happen to be recording a 4th season of Dark Dice in the near future, in person, we would only be comfortable doing so because of the amazing technology provided to us by Nomono. For more information, go to nomono.co, not .com, that's NOMONO.co. Now, let's get started.
Shalis Pace, Salis.
Do you seek him?
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 Do you seek the nameless god?
You have found yourself among those who roll the dark dice. What you are about to hear happened long ago, a story brought back from the edge of oblivion, dutifully transcribed and enhanced orally to better captivate your attention. Previously, the crew and guests of the Willow's Wake escaped the sunken bulwark and its faithful. All seemed well enough, with murder suspect and warlock Ogun now safely imprisoned. Only one obstacle now remained between the Willow and Winterport. Dark Dice, Shores of the Silver Thrum, Chapter 10, The Tempest. A few days had passed at sea, and during the available evenings, the shipwright of the Willow's Wake, Jare Driftwood, was working on a puzzle of his own.
Rolling a series of investigation and intelligence checks to uncover the secrets of the Celagon puzzle sphere he'd rescued from the depths of the sunken bulwark.
Okay, this is where... Then if I turn this, maybe... he's going to use one of his tools to scratch away something where he thinks that must be dirt. Is it dust? Is it another thing that he can turn around? Okay, well, I think...
With a click, something slid into place, and the sphere opened, revealing 3 glittering rubies and a small diamond. A fortune he never could have envisioned for himself.
As Jare is amazed that this should be in there, something that he clearly didn't expect from a sphere with Celagon's carvings on it, because this seems like riches.
With a successful religion check, Jare remembered hearing that priests of various faiths were sometimes known to store their wealth within statues or grand decorations of gold, ivory, or gems, forms that could be melted down for raw currency to save a village, should such a need arise. Selagon, Lord of Light, was also the Lord of Logic and Rationality, so storing such wealth within a toy-like object lined up with what Jare knew of the feathered deity, a detail apparently lost on the sunken priests.
Which is exactly why Jare, knowing how to open it and how to close it quickly, he's going to close it again. He's going to turn that 1 or 2 knobs, I don't know what exactly it has, he's going to do like 3 moves away from opening it and then stash it somewhere safe, probably his backpack. And then once they make port, he's going to try and sell that maybe, or keep it as a gift, or just a souvenir.
The following few days were uneventful. Vind worked to acquire the trust of those aboard. Yuehai shared more stories with the crew, while memorizing the tales they in turn shared with her. Vivianna took care of Fluffy the owlbear and mostly chatted with Yuehai, writing in her journal and preparing a goodbye of sorts for Lan, once they reached Winterport. Vivianna had seen death before, read about it, had trained to inflict it, but seeing someone she actually cared about die, and so unexpectedly, and the fear that Konvo's words might hold truth. She wasn't the only one hurting, however, as Konvo and Jare were both cast in a strange light by the other crewmates, who wouldn't say it aloud, but who also seemed to hold them at least partially responsible for the tragedy during the last light ritual, and judged them harshly for their inaction during Vind and Aje's fight. During one of the quieter nights, Jare found himself with some downtime and the opportunity to look over the Lost Vessel manifest that seemed to almost itch at his very heart. Unwilling to let anyone else see the manifest before he could memorize its details, he crept within the deep holes.
He's going to take out that piece of paper again. He's going to go over the list. He's running his finger down to where the Nimble Lark is listed. And again, as he does so, he's taking a moment to reflect on what happened back then, what it's turned his life into, because every time he sees that name, he cannot help but... Here's a German phrase for you. Hat einen Frosch im Hals. If your throat, if you're doing the thing where you're welling up and you cannot speak as clearly, he's sitting there going, swallowing hard, and he's running his finger over the everything that he's seeing, the names of the vessels, the locations where they were constructed, the last known locations. This is something new to him, that ship, with the wreckage of which washed onto shore, he would have figured that it would be somewhere around Vindelhaven where that ship got lost. He sees Lost at Sea, which doesn't help him at all, because ships disappear at sea. They crack, they burn, scurvy is a thing. So that doesn't strike him as odd just yet, but when he goes over the list and he sees other ships that were lost at sea, and cross-referencing all the data that he has, he starts wondering that all of the ships, or most of the ships, that were lost at sea at around that time were built by the same people.
The Stammen shipwrights in Obtain and the Royal shipwrights in Vindelport.
And as if that wasn't interesting enough, he also sees that most of these ships, or all of these ships as far as he can tell, at least from that one page that he has, were named for birds. Seabirds, all of them? I don't know, but birds. So creatures of the sky that were then lost at sea.
Jare had overheard many conversations on the docks regarding the foul omens associated with naming a ship after a bird, especially after a number of ships so aptly named were lost at sea a decade or so ago. And of the names of those ships lost on the paper before him, Jare recognized another ship he'd seen in person, a vessel he thought would never venture beneath the icy waves, a reminder that the natural power of the seas and storms could be greater than that of dragons. 35 ships, 5 built within 5 years, all vanishing 10 years ago. The same year he encountered the pieces of the nimble lark on that lost beach.
And I absolutely thought that I saw that, but I absolutely thought, well, it would have been because I only tore out that one page. I wouldn't have had the other years, so they might have been going on for a while before that.
To have this many newly built ships destroyed in such a short amount of time, apparently all in the same sailing season, in different locations around the world, struck Jare as something else.
They must have had a horrible shipwright. And who better to talk to about this than the captain? And also, would Jare know where this Abtain place is?
With a 20, Jare recalled its location. The Isle of Abtain, off the coast of Tyrol, within the sea realm of Vinalhaven. And with subsequent rolls that weren't quite as high, he'd not heard much of the shipwright companies in question, but perhaps this was because they were simply smaller companies. Vinalhaven had many ships, and it was not previously a goal of Jare's to become acquainted with all of them. Jare could recall, however, that Stammen Shipwrights had supposedly stopped building ships half a decade ago, switching focus to freight shipping like the Far Hauler Company, and renaming themselves to Stammen Shipping. Yes, Jare had seen their seal in the captain's quarters on one of the papers in his cabinet while he was making repairs. Jare was more eager than ever to get a second look at that paper now. Pocketing the manifest, Jare stepped above deck. The ringing of the ship's bell slowly faded to the forefront of Jare's distracted mind. He'd simply blotted the sound out. But now above deck he noted a tension among all present, and a still quiet between strikes of the bell. A storm. A tempest drew near.
Secure all you can!
First Mate Lurs barked across the deck, straining his eyes towards the darkness ahead as rain began to fall. As short-handed as the crew was, Jare felt reluctant to avoid helping the others wrestle with the storm. But the answers to questions he'd searched for, longed for, were within reach, and he reasoned that the captain should be very much awake by now and likely needed on deck. But as Jare reached the door to the captain's quarters, it was already ajar.
And of course, Jare opens the door,
perhaps a bit cautiously while calling out, Captain? Captain?
The door to the captain's quarters groaned, and inside, lit by dim, flickering candles, seated on the canvas-wrapped chair behind his desk, Captain Gelmain did not look up, nor did he wave.
Captain Gelmain? I was hoping to talk with you, but there appears to be a storm approaching. He's walking further into the room hesitantly and takes another step to make sure that the light is doing what he thinks it's doing, taking in the scene.
Instead, the man stared blankly over his charts, a stream of deep, sickly red tracing down his neck, staining the soft paper before him.
Get the sails wrapped up now!
Yahu's going to investigate what happened, and with a 15, can determine... this was done by a blade. But nothing looks like it's been stolen. Even the golden shark tooth remains on display. No footprints in the blood. Okay, and that's about all Jare can handle before his nerves get the better of him and he runs outside to yell, "Maud! Bloody murder! The captain's dead!"
Jare found First Mate, now Captain Lurs, at the helm, bow pointed into the wind, fear in his eyes between flashes of light as the Tempest rushed closer, bent on misery and destruction. A skills challenge had begun.
If you're not helping, secure yourself!
A heavy wind pushed southward across the deck. The sails and mast had not been fully furled or stowed, whipping in the bustling air before the skeletal crew. Then rushing westward, the wind shifted again. The ropes whistled and the canvas of the sails filled as the storm pushed in faster than imagined, and the Tempest was now upon the Willow's wake. Jare was first to act, using his acrobatics to attempt to bring the slippery sails and ropes under control, but failing terribly against the power of nature itself. So poor was the roll that as he ran across the deck and the winds shifted, a small reminder to mind the effing boom chimed in his thoughts immediately before the Willow's moon struck him for 6 damage, and he was required to make a dexterity saving throw to avoid being thrown overboard.
That's a 9 again.
As Yara plummeted into the icy waters, he required another Constitution saving throw against the freezing waters that could literally take his breath away on contact.
That's a 17.
Yet Yara proved to be exceptional under these circumstances, finding a loose piece of wood near the starboard aft that hadn't yet been checked off his list of repairs, requiring a dexterity roll to grab on before the Willow left him in its wake to freeze to death alone in the darkness of the open ocean. He had exactly one chance.
Okay, well then it's an 18.
Yara was somehow able to grab the side of the boat, struggling to grip his hands and feet within the small holes in the side of the ship, made specifically for incidents like these. Konvo, who had been on deck, witnessed Yara go over the edge and called out instantly, pointing at the shipwright with one hand while activating his fire rune, giving him double the proficiency on his task, putting his athletic abilities and strength to work, pulling ropes that would take in the sails.
19.
Konvo succeeded in unfurling the first set of sails of many, ensuring that the aft sails at least would not be taken away by these gales. However, within their private cabin, Vivianna and Yuehai began to notice the commotion outside.
There's a storm outside? That sounds like a crew problem. Let's just stay inside and try to enjoy a girls' night. Hey, Vivianna?
Yeah, let the men handle it.
Yeah.
Vind was next to have the opportunity to act.
I hate to say this, but I feel like Vind is in this place of not contentment, but as content as he can be for the time being. Whatever's going on above is really none of his concern.
At that exact moment, Mr. Omen darted up the hold, slamming the door behind him to aid those on deck, leaving Ula and Ajay alone.
No. Ajay's going to try and squeeze out of the bars, like dislocate something and squeeze out of the cell. It's a 4.
Ula would like to assist Ajay if he'd allow it, giving advantage on the roll.
Sure, thank you, Ula. Well, the downside is I rolled another 4 again.
Ajay took 7 damage as Ula snapped his leg, helping him fit through the bars.
I feel perhaps like we can talk a little bit later about the methods we use.
You're trying to dislocate yourself. I simply assisted.
Okay, I'm going to scream now.
Above deck, there was a man overboard, and those among the crew could see a curious glow as flickering sparks of pink engulfed the mast in brilliant light. Konvo knew this phenomenon as St. Elmo's fire, but this was a distraction as far as he was concerned as he quickly grabbed a rope, tying it to part of the enclosed helm and using his magical runes to embiggen himself once again to giant size. Konvo threw the rope to Yara, ready and waiting to pull the ship right up with all his strength if he could just grab onto it.
That's a 17.
Oh, nice. 19.
Over the next few seconds, Konvo was able to pull Yara up and get his feet firmly back on deck. And as the sopping shipwright felt the briefest respite, lightning struck the main mast of the Willow's wake, creating a thunderous explosion of energy, throwing lures who, like Konvo, was pulling in the main lines off the Willow. The active captain didn't even scream. He was likely dead from the blast well before he hit the water. Vind Greyview, hearing the thunderous boom upstairs, now again had the opportunity to get involved.
Noted, but I'll roll with what Vin would do and just sit tight. I mean, Ajay's in the cell, so he's got nothing else to really worry about.
Speaking of the shaman...
And now I have a broken leg. Thank you, Ula. Thank you so much.
Anytime.
I was being sarcastic. Please do not do that again.
It should fit now.
Ajay glared at Ula, making himself as tall and large as the cage would allow before threatening him.
You will help us escape so we can save this ship, without hurting me further. 18 on intimidation.
And suddenly, Ula was motivated, but it was unclear if he was afraid of Ajay or excited by what he had seen within him. The motivation ultimately didn't matter to Ajay, who used his newfound spark of inspiration to smash the bars of the cage just wide enough for them to fit through.
We made it. Thank you.
This is where we part ways.
The spell created a portal, a window to somewhere else, somewhere similarly dark. Perhaps somewhere else aboard the ship, but Ajay could only briefly ponder this, as after the spell was complete, Ula calmly walked through, sealing it behind him. Elsewhere on deck, with Lur's dead, one second mate, now technically captain, Alv Mitov called out orders while rushing to put out the fires in the mainsail.
Deckhands! Focus on the fire! Galask! The sails! Lupo! Keep us facing the waves! We can't take a full bash to the hull sides!
Freezing and disoriented as he was, Yara could feel that something, somewhere deep below, had cracked, perhaps caused by the lightning, and that water had begun to spill into the lowest depths of the deep holds.
Yet, strange as it may sound, the foremost concern on Yara's mind is sea. The Willow's wake is not near sinking, far from it, and they still have a fair shot at weathering the storm with minimal additional damage. But he can't do that if he's unsure that his little friend is safe. I'll roll a perception to find her, and also assess where he's needed the most to keep things from spinning out of control. more than they already are. 15.
Sealy was out of sight and thus presumed safe. The navigator was in full panic, squinting at distant waves through the darkness and heavy rain between lightning strikes. Ullman was working with Gallus to get the sails and fire, which had taken the topmost sail and half of the main mast under control, and Uda was presumably below deck. Yet it was hard to find anything through such a terrible tempest. Perceiving the shipwright's horrified expression and lack of motion for panic, Captain Mitov moved to slap Yara.
Back, Shion! Do something, Yara! Anything!
Aye, Captain.
Konvo.
I am going to call upon my decades of experience as a former first mate and use my survival to figure out the best path forward. I'm going to help Ab through this. It's first time acting as captain of this ship, and if there's anything I can do, I damn well know how to be a good first mate. 17.
As the situation began to parallel one from Konvo's past, the half-orc found that he had certain strong opinions on what they had to do to survive the coming maelstrom. He'd pondered similar options like these for days, nights, and weeks after. And as he reached Captain Ov Mitov, ready to share his assessment, she was suddenly taller, wider, and he stood before the love of his life, Captain Rose. His eyes welled up. There was so much he wanted to tell her. They could just turn around, quit while they were ahead. And while he opened his mouth, no words could be properly formed. His tears were invisible in the rain, and as Captain Rose's smile vanished, replaced instantly by Ov, Konvo noticed a wall of water behind her, coming toward the Willow as he gained 6 stress.
Konvo? Konvo, what is it? Konvo!
Behind you.
Below deck.
You know, the idea that I'm armed and that Ajay isn't right now, it's a very, very pleasing thought to Vind. So I think he's going to sneak into the hold where he's been kept, with a spear at the ready, seeing as Mr. Omen and Konvo are both on deck, with a 23 on stealth.
One room away, Ajay realized he smelled smoke, coming from a fire visible through the grating in the ceiling. The mast was on fire.
Oh, boom. I'm gonna Misty Step through that grate, for sure. Get up on deck and start helping out. Let's go. 18.
His body flickering, then vanishing into thin air, materialized on the deck next to Fluffy the owlbear, who, while startled, did not attempt to swat Ajay, perhaps more scared of the fire than of any creature on board.
Rogue wave! Pull side!
However, Ajay's victory was short-lived as a wall of water reached the Willow's wake. And despite Navigator Looper's best attempts, the ship was sent vertical, requiring all above deck to make dexterity saving throws.
Not a natural 20, but a 20.
9. 14.
And as the Willow stood on point, Vivianna and Yuehai were thrown from their beds, backs catching the wall as a great groaning and creaking was audible beneath. A few turns later, the ship landed with a loud crash, and dexterity saving throws were made. Vivianna and Yuehai were able to open the door to the outside, revealing the squall of rain and mayhem beyond. This strange sight dredged familiar memories for Yuehai, of other ships and other terrible happenings. Her breath froze within her lungs, but passing her sanity saving throw, she quickly snapped back to action.
Vivianna, there's something I need to tell you, because it seems like you may need to know. This is not my only form.
What? What do you mean?
I have a curse, and sometimes I can shapeshift into a large crocodile.
Now's not the time for jokes, Yuehai.
I'm serious! And if you think you can handle yourself, I'm going to transform in a moment. I need you to trust me. I'm not gonna eat you. You can piggyback on me and I'll get both of us somewhere safe.
Crocodiles are pretty sick, actually. But if you're telling the truth, I don't really have an option here. The ship is gonna go down. I don't see Fluffy, too. They can swim, right? Owlbears?
I'm pretty sure they can swim. I've seen it a few times.
Oh, God. I hope she's okay.
Let's just focus on ourselves right now.
You turn into, do you want me to turn around? Is this like a private thing?
It would be great if you can turn around while I turn and just look back in like 5 seconds. I'll make a growl when I'm done.
Yeah, no problem. I'll just close my eyes. Yeah.
Vivianna, confused at the request of privacy during such a life-threatening and chaotic time, closed her eyes. She felt the ship thrashing beneath her, smelled heavy, salted air, heard the cracking of wood, the crashing of thunder, and the tear of flesh. Just beyond her eyelids, the small Yuehai changed. Her black hair grew and grew, wrapping like vines over her limbs as it lengthened, tightening over her body until it formed a perfect black cocoon. But the shine of her new oily skin faded as the silky texture was pressed and bent to form the hard, scaly hide of reptilian skin. Her limbs had creaked and cracked as they shortened, and her nail beds split open as wide claws tore free. Her predator teeth pushed forward from her gums as her jaw bent and snapped, and her humanoid teeth folded back into the depths of her mouth. Where her growing hair had reached the floor, a thick, powerful tail now slammed to the breaking boards. But Yuehai's eyes, they almost stayed the same. A flash of black and gold, a primal depth that had been so out of place above the smile of the halfling, now graced the elongated head of a black crocodile, long protruding teeth reflecting the lightning as it danced under the clouds. Yuehai's new form slammed to the deck with its tail and growled.
I open my eyes and go, holy shit, yeah, you weren't kidding. I don't know who I thought you were kidding.
Hold my neck.
Hold and deck? What?
Hold my neck.
Hold my... Got it, yeah, hold my neck. Oh god. Seeing as I'll die if I don't do this, I nervously grab onto the giant black crocodile and close my eyes.
Hug it. Hug my neck.
Hog it? Why would I hog your neck? Hog? Hug. Got it, yeah, sure, hug it. Oh god.
Hanging on to the rough black scales of a giant saltwater crocodile larger than any she'd ever imagined could exist, Vivianna dove under the icy water with Yuehai, passing the immediate constitution roll and successfully holding her breath. Beneath the waves, sharp flashes of lightning and fire above seemed completely beautiful and terrible all at once. They swam onward, Yuehai rising every once in a while to allow Vivianna breath. But they soon realized that the raging ocean had swallowed them as they continued forward, lost to the darkness. Defying the odds, Jare miraculously found himself aboard with Looper, grasping her collar at one end, a patch of fixed railing in the other, as the ship was now fully vertical. Jare, who had used his Misty Step to teleport through the bars of the hold, found himself in a curious place in the air, but found purchase on a secure part of the ship that would prevent him from falling. As below, Vin became tangled in a maze of hammocks, as an owlbear flew past Jare's horns toward the back of the ship in the oceans below. The owlbear barreled into Konvo,
I'll gladly take that damage. Can I just, cushion Fluffy's fall?
who took 11 bludgeoning damage as Fluffy made contact with them, and both of them struck the mast. With his larger than normal size, Konvo was able to catch Fluffy, who, through no fault of Konvo's, was terrified and irritable. Jare passed another Constitution saving throw and required a dexterity roll.
12.
Helping Navigator Looper find a safe hold in the moments that felt like forever, as the Willow's wake was airborne. And as this moment stretched on, the great cracking weight of the Willow's masts, not meant to be sustained vertically, proved too much to bear as the forward mast split and snapped. A crack as powerful as lightning that broke toward the center deck, sending invisible shards of splintering wood in all directions, notably through the eyes and chest of the now-deceased sea sorcerer Galisk. The second mast, on fire, similarly began to buckle, but unlike its predecessor, dislodged entirely, smashing into the waters below. All that remained was the Willow's aft mast, which the embiggened Konvo had stored the sails for, and was now pinned against.
Alright, so I'm gonna try to unpin myself from this location. 16.
The number required was very close to what Konvo rolled, but unfortunately, it was not enough, and the mast snapped. Konvo found himself wrapped in the unfurling sails that pulled him and the struggling owlbear down into the icy seas, still attached to the Willow's wake, but trailing behind. Somewhere within the hull, Vin could feel the ship coming back to its normal horizontal orientation as the cracking wood screamed that it was again righted. Continuing his path toward the cell, spear drawn, Vin was surprised to find the bars bent and bashed and the cell itself empty of its inhabitants.
Son of a bitch. Okay, fearing that he's most certainly on deck, Vin's gonna rush up to the stairs to find him, rolling a non-natural 20 for dexterity to maintain his balance and stealth.
Vin looked through the absolute chaos with only one goal. Most of the crew were dead or down, and part of the deck was on fire. But this only served to illuminate the form of Vin's prey, Ogun, who ran toward the back of the ship to aid Konvo.
I'll stab him with the spear as he runs by. 15 to hit, 12 damage.
Jare was surprised, no, shocked to find a spear sticking into his stomach, the sneering form of Vin Greyview behind it. Would this be how he died? The spirits of his ancestors, Nimble, and perhaps even Alistair, stood all around Jare in a sea of silence, hands extended to gently rest on his shoulders and lend their strength. Through their spiritual reassurance, or perhaps adrenaline, Ajay used his reaction to grab the spear and push it through his body, twisting his weight to pull Vin toward him off balance as the heads of the shades all turned in unison to face him, forming a shapeless frenzy of ravenous claws that engulfed Vin, tearing at his arms and face, the hateful fury of the unavenged, hungering for payments due in flesh and blood.
8.
Failing his saving throw, Vin took 21 damage and was simply overwhelmed. As he started to black out from the agony, he simply abandoned his spear, and in a last-ditch effort, flailed in a futile attempt to grab and throw his javelins. It was now Ajay's turn to act, the spear still sticking out of his stomach, and his former assailant, Vin Greyview, the murderer of Alistair, Nimble-Remble Troutspine Trout, and who knows how many more, unconscious before him. It wouldn't take much to take the dagger from Captain Mitov.
I'm going to look down at Vin's unconscious body and, with all that's happening around, just say, "LilyPichu, decide your fate." And I'm going to run, grab the rope, and try and throw it towards Konvo in hopes that he grab hold of it and pull himself aboard. Survival.
That is amazing.
Incredibly cinematic.
Ajay, spear still sticking through him, ran across the flaming deck to throw the rope toward Konvo.
And shit, that's a natural one.
And promptly slipped. Konvo, still in the water but not succumbing to hypothermia, had one final roll to perhaps rescue his own life while in his embiggened state.
You know what? I'm gonna try to, no kidding, just like straight brute force swim to get back on the ship. 14.
Even with advantage and years of practice swimming, the waves this far north were too powerful and the storm too angry. The ship continued to move further away, but from this angle, Konvo could also make out a crack on the side of its hull, through which breached more water than the surviving crew could likely bail out. Exhausted as the cold set in, Konvo began to...
Remember that time I shot past the shark with just shooting the harpoon gun with the rope attached to it? Because that has a far greater reach than any rope you'd throw. If that happened before Konvo, and if Konvo was still enlarged, I would aim that harpoon gun straight... Well, I mean, not at his face, obviously.
Fire.
But
fire.
Arms somewhere, rope attached.
And Yara required an attack roll.
That's a 2 + 4.
No, that's not good.
The rope will be in his vicinity.
So I'm just looking at it as it goes over my head.
With the rope attached to it, that is also attached to the harpoon gun.
But then it gets flown over. It gets blown over by the wind, right? So it goes and then it just goes wide.
The DMs didn't even have to be the ones to say what happened because the players' ideas were already cruel enough. And it was at this time that Vin Greyview required a death saving throw. He would need to roll the 20-sided dice, a natural 1 causing instant death, like in Lon's case, and the natural 20 allowing him to survive. Otherwise, he'd likely fall overboard and drown beneath the waves within 2 turns, as none were likely to intervene.
So, I really like these dice you got me because I rolled a 20.
What? What the fuck?
Woohoo!
And with that, the Willow's wake sharply struck the water, cracking the hull and jostling the very flammable contents between the deep holds and the fires within the galley, sparking an explosion that rent the ship into splinters. In the blink of an eye, a metal winch flew toward Yara's head.
Yara, watch out!
But Captain Mitov jumped in the way, as secondary explosions blinded the senses to pain and cold.
Everything began to sink. There was no more safety. There was only sea and storm. Those still alive fell beneath the waves or grasped for dear life onto things that still floated, hoping they would remain that way. But as time passed with the raging, freezing storm, they could endure no more, and all sounds and feelings were replaced by only a constant hum, a static rolling over them. They were part of an endless, tiny roar. The lightning strikes that burned into their eyes were gone. There was only darkness. This might have been death coming for each of them individually after all of this. Every fight they'd had, every goal, every hardship, every missed opportunity, these things all fell further away over the raging ocean that had swallowed them. Far below, sinking deeper still, Konvo's final thoughts rested not on himself.
My dearest, I tried my best. I tried to live for you, for me, for everybody else. Alas, it seems Neldich has once again come to claim what is hers. I'll be with you soon, my love.
Dark Dice, Shores of the Silver Thrum. Created by Travis Vengroff and K.A. Statz. Featuring Jasper William Cartwright as Ogun, Florian Seidler as Jare Driftwood, Enrique Perez as Konvo, Eric Nelsen as Greyview, LilyPichu as Vivianna Bloodchamber, Sam Yao as Yuehai, and Travis Vengroff and K.A. Statz as co-dungeon masters. Also featuring the voices of Kiera Baxendale, Peter Joseph Lewis, and Chris Lurs. This episode was produced and edited with sound design by Travis Vengroff, with dialogue editing and assistance by Kayla Shu, mixing and mastering by Marisa Ewing, transcriptions by Shion Francois, and executive producers Maico Villegas, Dennis Greenhill, Carol Vengroff, and Dearest AJ Pumpkin. This episode features music by David Wise and Stephen Millen. To support future productions like this one, please support us on Patreon at patreon.com/Fool and Scholar. This is a Fool and Scholar production. Thank you for listening.